One thing I wanted to ask you before we move on is the contradiction here where the reality does indeed bite, but at the same time, you have Zelensky. He met with Finland's prime minister in the last 24 hours and reiterated that the counteroffensive is just beginning. And then you have the United States. U.S. officials have been leaking to the media for a while now, but the Wall Street Journal is the latest to publish unhappiness with Kiev and Zelensky in particular because of the overall strategy. So Zelensky's illusion, all of the forces involved in the strategic thinking behind Ukraine's counteroffensive. The U.S. is not happy because they're not doing it right. But everything you said makes me think, well, why would you want them to do it right? Wouldn't it be in the best interest to stop this? Because right now it feels like Ukrainian forces are just being slaughtered. They're just throwing. I mean, I think it was Russia. I think Russia came out and said they're just throwing themselves on our minds. Like that's what's happening. Your reaction to that?
Well, let's start with Zelensky's grand European tour. Again, not to be too facetious, but what the heck? Have you seen Monty Python's Search for the Holy Grail and
Yes,
the
I
famous
have.
duel between King Arthur and the Black Knight? That's what Zelensky reminds me of. It's okay, just a scratch. And he's just hopping around with no arms, no legs, bleeding to death, trying to headbutt the guy. I've got the counteroffensive just started. No, dude, it's over. And I just feel like Europe should actually be like King Arthur, saying, you're crippled, you're hurt, it's over. But instead, Europe's agreeing with the Black Knight, saying, yeah, it's just a scratch, all's good. It's delusional what's going on, delusional. A little tangent off this. Part of the delusion is this F-16 nonsense. And I just try and remind people, let's just focus on the Netherlands for a second. They're supposed to be giving 42 F-16s, and people are going, wow, game changer. That's it, baby, the F-16. Well, they're giving them old airplanes. Here's the important part. Of the 42, 18 are hangar queens that have been cannibalized by the Dutch to keep the 24 operational. They can't fly. Pro hint. So it ain't 42. We're down to 24 airframes, of which 8 of those airframes, I believe, actually reside in the United States, where the Dutch have a permanent training mission. So those planes are there and they're not coming back. So it's 24 minus 8, which brings us to Marine Corps math, 16 airframes. These 16 airframes are old airframes, very old airframes. In the late 1990s, they underwent what's called a midlife upgrade, MLU. Why would you need an MLU? Well, see, the F-16 was designed to be a lightweight air supremacy fighter. That means it's supposed to take off and just have some sidewinders and some sparrows. And later on, as we developed, we got the AMRAAMs. These are all surface or air-to-air missiles that can be fired against other airplanes. Lightweight means it's maneuverable. It can take all the torque and it can do all this wonderful stuff. But because the United States, we never do things the right way. Once the plane was designed, we told General Dynamics, the designer, we want it to be a multi-role fighter. So in addition to the air-to-air, they now had to make hard points that put bombs on them and sensors on them, on the aircraft. Now, when the plane is designed to be a lightweight air-to-air fighter, the airframe is designed to take certain stresses based upon estimated weights. And again, I'm not a physics guy, but I mean, everybody knows you can take something and put a weight on it. You can see it bend. You see the torque on it, the stress on it. Then you subject it to a G-force. You give it even more, so you have to build the airframe to resist all that. And it's based upon how much weight you have at the end of the wingtip, et cetera. The drag coefficient, all this stuff goes into that design. That's why the planes cost a lot of money to build, because smart people have designed it. But then you go and change everything, put all this weight on it. The plane ain't built to carry that much weight. So what happens is the plane in its midlife, when it's supposed to be still halfway through its operational, functionality, it has hairline fractures in the airframe. the plane's falling apart, literally, because it's not designed to do what it was done. So you have to pull that plane out and you have to totally upgrade it. You have to go in. There's a technique, cold blending or cold welding. Again, I'm not an engineer, but they repair the hairline fractures. They test the airplane to make sure that the stress, and you know what happens to the planes that fail the test? They go in the hangar and they become hangar queens, and they're used for spare parts. So that's where you get those 18 that are in the hangar queens. But the ones that are left, they were given a 5,000 hour life extension because, again, the plane is based upon flight hours. You know, that's how you determine. It's not years so much because it's sitting there, not putting stress on the plane. As long as you keep it clean, it's not going to corrode to death rapidly. What hurts the plane is flying it and the stress you're placing on the airframe and on the various parts of the plane. It was given 5,000 additional hours. That was in 1997 to early 2000s. It's currently 2023. I can guarantee you that every one of those planes has exceeded the 5,000 hour time point. There may have been other minor repairs done, but the bottom line is these planes are worn out. They're no longer flyable. And that's why the Dutch Air Force is getting rid of them. You see, the Dutch could have given these F-16s a year ago or even more when the Ukrainians were asking them before, but they didn't. Why? Because the Dutch, just like every other government in the world, paid for them. Many of them were built at a General Dynamics facility or a Dutch facility using on contract to General Dynamics in Schiphol, Netherlands. They bought and paid for these things, and they're going to squeeze every last euro. I guess they call them cents there, right? In the euro, it's a euro and a cent, just like us, cent, dollar, cent, euro. I don't know. But they're going to squeeze every last little piece of European money out of this airplane that they can. They've done that. These planes have been squeezed out. Now they're going to give them to the Ukrainians. Wow. So the Ukrainians are getting airplanes that are literally falling apart. And now it's not just that, but they haven't done the upgrades. For instance, again, I don't want to get too technical here, but the avionics and all the flight computers and the weapon systems, they can be upgraded to take in new capabilities, new weapon systems, new radars, the whole thing. And these are tapes. So that you run it, again, I've never been rich enough to buy one of these fancy new cars that are electronic till recently. I got a Mazda CX-5. And so the car actually talks to me, you need oil, you need this. The car's telling me what's wrong. And when finally the car just basically says, we need to be totally looked at by a computer. And it's blinking at you. So you have to go into maintenance and they bring out this thing and they plug it in. It costs you $1 million just to have it plugged in. And the computer talks to each other. And they figure out what's wrong and they fix it. Same thing with airplanes. But the fix is a tape. They call it a tape. Basically, it's a reprogramming. And so there's been several tapes that have gone through several iterations, upgrades. The Dutch stopped upgrading the plane a long time ago. They knew it was near the end of its lifespan. And so the F-16 is not only an old airplane, the guts of it, the things that make it work, it doesn't have the most modern tape either. It's old. All I'm trying to say is that the Dutch are giving the Ukrainians a piece of crap. But here's the worst part, because a piece of crap flown by an effective pilot can still work. Where did we see that? Maverick, Top Gun 2. I mean, Tom Cruise went and climbed into an Iranian F-14 and took off and shot down the Iranian Su-57, the most modern airplane in the world, because a good pilot in an airplane is better than a bad pilot in a good airplane. That's what Hollywood told me, but it's also true in reality. A good pilot can make things happen. The Ukrainians aren't good pilots, not in F-16s. The F-16 is a totally different airframe than anything they're currently flying right now. They have to be totally retrained. There's a squadron in South Carolina that has been doing transition training for Warsaw Pact pilots who've been flying MiG-29s and other Soviet-era aircraft and transitioning them to the F-16. And they said the best thing we could want is a pilot with no experience in a Soviet-era thing, because their mind isn't polluted. Because it's like muscle memory. I don't know your background, but I imagine you understand that if you do repetitive things over and over again, it's muscle memory, so that if something happens, You're just automatically responding. You don't have to think about it. What we teach, and when you go into combat, the whole counter ambush drill, the whole concept of it is, ambush, 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 assault, and you assault through the ambush. The dumbest thing in the world, if you think about it, because you're being shot at. And now I'm saying what you have to do is assault through the ambush. Why? Because if you lie down in the ambush, you're where the enemy wants you. They picked that ambush area for a reason. If you lie down, you're in the kill zone and you're going to die. So your best course of action is to immediately try and put suppressing fire on the people shooting you, hitting the pause so you can assault through them with violence of action, break through the ambush, and live. But you're not going to do that if you have to think. You have to train the people over and over and over and over again. So automatically, boom, ambush, boom, assault, go. Muscle memory. That happens in infantry. It happens in everything. Pilots is very important because flying is instinctive. And so you're training yourself with things, the feel of the airplane, et cetera, et cetera. If you've been flying a MiG, it's a different airframe, different, every flight parameters, performance, everything's different. And actually the mechanism of flying is different. Even the yoke is different. So you're in a MiG, let's say you're the best MiG pilot in the world. All your muscle memory is built to that MiG, everything, how it handles, how it feels. Now they're going to put you in F-16, totally different. And you have no muscle memory there. And every time you get stressed, your brain's going to send you back to what you originally did. So you're going to go back to MiG mode. So already you're going to die because you're going to be in the middle of a dogfight. Something's going to happen. You have to do a split S, but you're going to MiG mode. That doesn't work. You've bled off too much airspeed. You start to stall. You slow up. Bam, you're dead. That happens in air-to-air combat. You screw up, you die instantly. And the guy said, in 6 months, we can't train these guys. They actually come out worse than when they came in if we're trying to transition them. We need new guys, but the new guy, all he can do after 6 months is take off, go a little bit left, a little bit right, and land. That's it. No complex maneuvering, no split S, no understanding the tactics of what happens in a head-on engagement. How do you get somebody who comes in from this angle? How do you get an advantageous position on them? You have to train that over and over again over the course of many years to do this. They're going to get a small package of familiarity training, and then they're going to go up against the Russian Air Force that knows their airplanes very well, very good pilots. They're going to get shot down every single time. That's in an air-to-air mode. What happens if you want to put them in air-to-ground mode? Totally different training. And they're not being trained. Are they going to be trained for air-to-air, air-to-ground? Because you can't do both. Pick one. They're not going to get any. They're getting rudimentary. They're going to go to air-to-ground, close air support to the forces, but they don't know how to do that flight profile. They haven't trained on it. They're going to die because they don't have suppression of enemy air defense, a third flight profile, a whole unique skill set. They don't have that either. So the three things they need, air-to-air to sweep the Russian Air Force out, suppression of any air defense to suppress the Russian air defense so that the air-to-ground can come in and support the ground troops as they advance. They can't do any of them. They're all going to die. They're all going to die. Reality bites. So that's the thing with Zelensky over there trying to delude himself into saying, we're gonna keep this thing going. Now we come to NATO. I just told you they're selling a bill of goods with the F-16. Here's the thing about NATO. I will tell you this right now. As somebody, given it's ancient history, but very few people have ever planned and executed a major breaching operation against an enemy in a prepared defensive position. I designed it for the Marine Corps in the Gulf War. I'm pretty proud of that fact. But I know what it took to go into that, and I know how the Marines executed it. We executed it successfully, but it wasn't easy. But we did it because we brought in overwhelming supporting fires. We suppressed the hell out of the enemy, their artillery capability. We bought time for the infantry to painstakingly clear the minefields so that we could rapidly advance to the defenses, clear them, and then push through and penetrate. That's what we did. This is what the Marine Corps, the finest fighting force the world has ever seen. It takes a lot of time to train Marines and train them to do that job, months and months and months, just for that specific job. Ukrainians aren't Marines. These guys are, these are units for the most part. They've been butchered in early fighting. They have a high percentage of new joins who have received 21 days of basic training, then maybe a couple more weeks of combined arms training. That's not enough. I was in an artillery unit during the Cold War, And it took us 2.5 years to master maneuver warfare before we said we're ready to actually fight the Russians and win. We could have fought the Russians prior to that. We wouldn't have won because we hadn't mastered it yet. 2.5 years in the field doing nonstop fire and maneuver, we got to the point where we said, we're ready to do this. We can do this. But then you have to maintain that training. Here you're taking guys who received 21 days of training in Great Britain. Then they went to, to Germany, and they got another 3, 4, 5 weeks of combined arms training. Then they're told to go execute a mission without adequate supporting arms. I'll make this as simple as possible. There's not a NATO unit in the world that could do what NATO's asking Ukraine to do with troops that have been trained to the level that the Ukrainians have been trained. It's impossible. And NATO knows this. So I get sick to my stomach every time I hear something where Americans are saying, you're just not doing it aggressively enough. Hey, hero, if you think you can do it, take your Army brigade and have them go. And I'll tell you what will happen to the U.S. Army brigade. They will all die in the fields of Robottino before they get to the village. Because it's a very difficult job to do. And the U.S. military in Europe doesn't have sufficient resources necessary to adequately suppress the Russian defenses to get the outcome desired. You have to bring in a whole bunch more troops, which we don't have anymore. So it is hypocrisy, but it's more than hypocrisy. It's literally criminal negligence. I'll put it as this way. If the Ukrainians were an American military formation that was sent into battle the way they are and getting slaughtered the way they are with inadequate training, inadequate preparation, and the commander knew that it was going to happen, Congress would hold an inquiry and find the commanders criminally liable for murdering American soldiers. Because that's what's happening right now. The Ukrainian soldiers are being murdered because they don't have a chance. They never had a chance. We knew they never had a chance. We knew that they had inadequate training. We knew that they didn't have familiarization with the equipment necessary to perform, sustained combat operations. They didn't have the logistical sustainability, but more importantly, they didn't have the firepower necessary to suppress the Russians. It's not just the minefields that are killing the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are being killed by mobile anti-tank teams behind the minefields that every time the Ukrainians pause, these anti-tank teams come up, pop, 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 blow them up, and then disappear. And then you have Ka-52 Alligator helicopters roaming the battlefield because Ukrainians don't have effective anti-air defense. These guys are roaming the battlefield, popping off the Ukrainian armor vehicles that are stalled in the minefield. The Ukrainians are dying because as they come close to the Russians, they're entering pre-planned fire boxes that the Russians have already determined how many Grad missile launchers, how many artillery pieces that come. They fire them. They land on this area because they pre-registered the fires. Boom, they kill everybody. That's what's killing the Ukrainians. And we haven't given them, the Ukrainians, the ability to sweep the Russian air power away, to suppress the Russian anti-tank teams, and to suppress Russian artillery and infantry positions to buy the time necessary to clear adequate mine passages through the minefields. Again, I designed the Marine Corps breaching attack against Iraq in 1991. It went exactly the way it was designed. But when we first started wargaming it, we got beat every time because we didn't put enough supporting arms on the target. We had to tell them, you're going to have to bring in more aircraft. You're going to have to bring in more artillery. You're going to have to suppress greater. You're going to have to double, triple, quadruple the amount of firepower suppression you think you need so that the troops can get through that minefield and break. And they did, and we won. But Ukraine doesn't have any of that. That's why they're getting slaughtered. That's why they're getting slaughtered. And we know that was going to happen. It sickens me when I read things that say, from these fat, useless U.S. military officers sitting in their air-conditioned office saying, well, they're just not trying hard enough. You got to be more aggressive. You got to be willing to take casualties. It's war. Really?
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.